Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, hanging out.
Nerdarchist Ted.
And we had a viewer it was a GM 911, but I kind of fielded it in a comment or a Facebook message from Eldridge Andy, but I thought it was useful useful enough that we could do a video about it, and maybe it'll help somebody else in their game. Head down to the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy, the newsletter, get weekly tips, and even learn how to game with Nerdarchy.
All right, so this is a really useful topic because, D&D is such a wide spectrum of, magic item availability. And you can run everything from just getting a magic item is a feat in and of itself because they just don't exist. The +1 sword is your legendary item. And then there's the other ones where, like the other side of the spectrum is they're literally everywhere and, you're going to have them, in spades by 3rd and 4th level.
Yeah, so he talked about there's a profession that even makes magic items in his campaign world, which, Eberron had Magerites, which could do it as well. Which was in 3rd edition had NPC character classes, and their thing was, they were a magic one. And, but he wants to go, well, how do I tell my players that, there's a profession that does it, yet, they're still not, common or rare.
Well, so he doesn't want to just tell them it's cost prohibitive.
Yes.
So you have to say, all right, well, what options are there? So in order to make a magic item, depending upon what your school of thought is, there are several things that you typically need. You need someone who is skilled enough to be able to do it, regardless of whether you're saying, oh, you're a magic user or anyone can do it. In Forgotten Realms, the novel series, a dwarven fighter wound up doing it. But in your world, it's set as to what it is that you're allowing.
Yeah, you need someone that can craft the receptacle for the magic and someone to put the magic in. Mm-hmm. They could be different people or the same people.
You typically need, a formula, if you will, of how to go about doing it. Because you can't just say, okay, I'm a magic user. I'm just going to put magic into a thing. Well, that doesn't work. Okay, well, mages that can just spew forth magic. Okay, well, I can cast Fireball over and over again. Okay, well, that means you're just going to heat something up. That doesn't mean it's going to store any of that magic. And then you need whatever your components, reagents, to make the whole thing come together.
And there's also a bridge too between that, that was introduced in 3rd edition in Eberron, which was the concept of a schema, which is basically.
Well, I consider that the formula.
Yeah, well, no, it's different.
Okay.
Because in previous editions you could write the formula, but even if you made an item, another wizard couldn't just come along and use your formula.
Okay.
It was almost unique, just like your spell book's unique, and you have to rework the spells. The schema itself is actually unique in the sense that it's universal. Mm-hmm. Where if one wizard makes a wand, creates the formula for the wand, the fireballs, another wizard isn't necessarily able to reuse it.
Okay.
The schema is kind of the bridge between.
Okay. And that's probably what Brunar would have had, even though this was before 3rd edition.
Yes.
But he had a scroll that, allowed him to be able...
A ritual in a bottle.
And then he had this magic dust, which later, 4th edition talked about the Residium. So, that whole process really, spewed forth a couple of ideas.
Yeah, I don't know if they're linked in any way, or not, but that's definitely an interesting way to look at it. So here's one of the things that I kind of threw out there when I answered the question. First of all, I said, well, how many Lamborghinis have you seen? Right? Someone makes it. There's people that make them. There's a whole car company. That's what they make, Lamborghinis. But how many have you seen? Now, I've actually seen Lamborghinis, but not many.
Right.
Then I said, well, what about, and I had to actually look this up, and I don't actually remember off the top of my head now. I think it was $100,000 bill. was the highest denomination. I could be wrong, but I actually had to look it up.
Right.
Because it's so large. They're not in print anymore, but at some point there was a plate to make them,
Right.
you know, and they were made.
Right.
And now you're talking about something that's actually being printed as opposed to like handcrafted or made.
Right.
And then I also used the example of artisans or artists, even in this day and age, where they just create one piece of art
Right.
at a time. You know, so yes, there's people that do it, but you know, I'm not an art guy. I don't like what is it, Dali, or what is it, Dali?
Dolly.
Yeah, is he still alive? Is he one of the ones that's alive making art? Like, you know, just pick whoever a prominent artist that's alive and see how many pieces of work they're making and what they're going for. You know, so yeah, they're making it, but that doesn't mean their art isn't falling out of the sky. And if
Just because there is a profession and things are being crafted does not mean, you know, that it is a, a factory that is pumping them out like crazy. And, oh, look at this. We've got +1 swords in every armory around the world.
well, yeah, and that's another thing too. Like, that's a way for individuals to create scarcity and make their products more valuable is by not making more of them, you know, by not glutting the market with them.
Right.
You know, whereas, you know, when you have a manufacturer that produces a ton of stuff, you know, it tends to be a lot less expensive.
Right.
You know, and then also there is also the fact that, you know, the ingredients you're using to create magic items are going to be costly as well. And it's even more so, like, it could even be more than being costly. They could just be hard to obtain. Like,
Well, you've got costly because they're rare. You've got hard to obtain because it could be the flowers that only bloom once every 6 months, or only bloom once a month, whatever.
Or the plaque from the teeth of a gold dragon.
You could have something that is incredibly dangerous. Well, I need blood from a red dragon. Well, okay, well, there's tons of wormlings out there, right? No, it's got to be an ancient red dragon. Oh, well, crap, now you're not going to get that too easily.
Right. Yeah. And you could definitely go like AD&D style, where it's like blood of an ancient red dragon given freely.
Oh, now you're entering into a whole new bargain, because now, it's a bargain. You're going to have to talk to that dragon and be like, all right, well, what is it going to take for me to get the vial of blood from you? For, it's only a couple drops by your standards, but I've got to have you say yes.
Yes. or the joyful tears of a unicorn. So like AD&D, like you could create magic items, and like it was a quest.
Right.
It was like a laundry list of stuff you needed, and then you're gonna have to go on a bunch of quests to get them, and then like you could have your +1 sword.
Right.
So
it's like I got 13 +1 swords on the quest trying to make my +1 sword. What the flip?
Yeah, pretty much. Now, in 3rd edition, they really just made it really easy. Take this feat, spend the XP.
Right.
Which kind of sucked if you're the mage, because you're like, yeah, but I'm not getting any levels. Everyone's gaining levels, and I can make this magic stuff. I don't know if it's worth it. They kind of fixed it with the Artificer, which was a class designed to do that, and they actually got XP just for that. Then there was more feats that you could take to lower the cost of the XP, but still, it was definitely a trade-off.
Right.
4th edition, they introduced Residium and the concept of, you can actually siphon the magic from one item to make another. While interesting, I would never want to see it as widespread as I believe it was in 4th edition, where it was just a ritual you could get and everyone could do it.
Right.
No problem.
I am definitely of the idea that, stems off of Brunar, of saying anyone should be able to do this. I like that idea.
Under the right circumstances.
Under the right circumstances. Yeah. Having a schema or having, something. Like, I don't want to have to make you take a feat. I don't want to have to make you, use some kind of mechanical thing that takes away from the, 5th edition build. But I definitely feel that there should be, you can't just be like, all right, well, today I want to make a magic item.
Right.
And... there's different schools of thought. Like Scott, early on in the game, he was like, oh, well, I've got money and I just want to do this.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, well, I don't want to entirely squash you, but there is no specific rules that say this is what it takes or this is what you need. So I was like, well, let's see what happens. And, I don't know what, this is again, going back to the notes of being able to, rewatch a recorded video. But I can look and see, okay, well, I think I made him make a die roll. It wasn't as high as I would have liked. So I didn't want to completely ruin everything he did. So I made a minor magic item, just not the one he wanted.
Yeah, he wanted a ring of water walk. I don't even know why he wanted a ring of water walking, but
not like we've done a lot with water, So
Yeah.
I wound up being a ring of create water, and it's got charges and whatever have you. And it was interesting, but he has a completely different school of thought in regards to magic items, in the actual.
oh yeah,
game.
he wants the magic mall, the magic item super mall, and definitely he was so happy when they put the magic items in the player's handbook.
Oh yeah.
In 4th edition.
Yeah,
But
he's
yeah,
like, that's right where they're supposed to be.
pretty much. But so I think through comments or whatever, I had answered Eldritch Eddie's question. But maybe this is something that comes up in your game. Maybe your players are always kind of like, well, why can't I buy magic items? Or if there's people that make it, you should be able to buy it. There should be more of it. These are the arguments that we have. These are why we think it shouldn't be like that, and our rationale for it. But in the comments below, you guys can let us know. Maybe you think we're completely wrong and you agree with Scott, and we should put them back in the player's handbook for 6th edition Dungeons and Dragons. I kid. I hope to see this one stay around for a long time. But while you're at it, like, share, and subscribe.
You can follow us on Twitter @Nerdarchy.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.